Today, Jupiter is in the 24th degree of Aries. Open window and a net curtain blowing into a cornucopia. So what we're seeing here is a window open, allowing the wind from outside to enter the room, blowing the net curtains so that they take the shape of a cornucopia. So this is a very rich image that we're working with here. Rudyard brings up the term pneuma, which is an ancient Greek term meaning breath or soul. So you can see similarities with prana, for example. But this term was really picked up on by Aristotle and the Stoics, but has an even deeper history in ancient Greece. Odysseus is led home by a specific wind that was not only divine, but had its own personality. And there's other winds that have their own personality, north, south, east, and west. They all have a different divine personality to the ancient Greeks. And this was a sort of non-dualist perspective where they didn't see a difference between spirit and nature. They saw that spirit was a part of nature and nature itself was divine and spiritual. And they saw the breath as what enlivens matter, so that a living being was more than just matter, because the breath, the air, entered the living being and animated it. And that's sort of what's happening here, is that the wind is coming in through the window and animating the net curtain, the material, so that it takes on this enlivened existence as a cornucopia. It's an activity. The wind blows, it's an action. It can't be held down, but while it's inhabiting the material, this action is creating a living being. And this kind of, we've been trying to bring spirit into the material all the way since Aries 15, when we learn to weave the infinite into the finite. And now we've got to a point where we're simply creating the space for the infinite to enter into the material world. The past 3 degrees of this expression that we're in, of progression, were Aries 21, Pugilist entering the ring, Aries 22, Gate to the Garden of Desire. These two sort of yin and yang forces culminated in Aries 23, Woman in pastel colors carrying heavy and valuable but veiled load. And we saw this as a pregnancy, the 2 coming together to create 3. And it's sort of this quantum biological process that takes place that science is just catching up to, with using terms like quantum biology, where if the conditions are right, and Aristotle, through observing the world, came to this conclusion too, where if the conditions are right, there's a equilibrium of dryness and moisture, of hot and cold, then the pneuma can enter into the material and create a living being, a living activity that creates a living multiplicity that begins to coordinate and organize into a living being. So that's what we're creating here It's interesting how the woman first becomes pregnant. She first does the work in the material world, and then the pneuma, the spirit, enters into the material once she's taken the time to be committed to this pregnancy, to take responsibility, to hold it sacred. Then now the spirit is coming in and creating a cornucopia. Every living being has so much potential that can be tapped into. And Aristotle even says that the pneuma, it not only creates life, but it helps improve life. So the more you're bringing the pneuma in, allowing it, creating these areas for the pneuma to occupy, the more it comes in and can improve upon the organization that is your organism. All the different cells having to work together to collaborate to create you. And that sort of, for Jupiter in this degree, you can see how you can use that same principle for your own Jupiter project or whatever you're working on, whatever you're trying to manifest, whatever you're just at the beginning stages of creating. How can you use that pneuma principle of creating the right conditions for life to effortlessly enter and to begin to froth over and bubble? And it's just sort of, once the pneuma enters the material, then it has this autonomy where it can function on its own. And that's sort of what you want with a project, is that you put in all this effort and commitment to bring it into the world, but then at a certain point, you want to be able to release it and let it have a life of its own. And that's sort of what's happening here. And one thing that the ancient Greeks talked about with pneuma, and they had even other names for air, the psyche, for example, that we consider the soul, was also had air and wind-like qualities. And they didn't see this as a metaphor that the soul was like the wind. They saw these two as the soul and the wind are the same things. So that's kind of like, it's almost hard for us to conceive of that with the way that our frame of reference is, but it's an interesting thing to consider. And one thing that the air and the wind and breath could do was help attune the organism so that the tone of the person was the right tone. So if you were going to do good works, for example, your whole, what you wanted, who you were, your desire, everything was in attunement with each other, so that while you went out and performed your good works, you would never hit a sour note. It would be, everything would be harmonious. And so developing that attunement would help people avoid acting in situations in a way that was disharmonious. And I think that saves people a lot of energy. So it makes sense for that to be in the expression of progression, where we are learning how to, not expend too much energy to really sort of develop habits around doing good and being happy and positive, that then increase our energy even more. So we're really building up our vitality so that we can see our projects through to the end. The next degree of Aries that Jupiter will be moving into in a few days, a double promise. And this you can see as the double promise that we've been creating this whole time. Rudyard calls this, calls attention to the fact that we're in a probationary period through all of this, where we're trying to, we're developing this relationship with Spirit, and we're trying to show Spirit that we're somebody that knows how to operate in the material world and in the spirit realm, and that Spirit can trust us and have things come through us, and Spirit will know that we're committed and responsible and want to see these things through to the end. So the double promise is sort of the promise we're making on the spiritual realm and on the earth plane. So we're making promises that are being connected from the wind. The wind blows from the spirit realm into this realm. That's what's seen with Pneuma. And so the Pneuma is kind of ushering us in to take place in both those worlds, and bringing that child, whether it's a creative child like a project or an actual child, into this earth. You are sort of given this responsibility that shouldn't be taken lightly. And so this double promise is really, it's a promise you're making to Spirit, but also to yourself, that you're going to stay dedicated to expanding your consciousness, which is what you're on the earth plane to do. This double promise really ties into the concept of attunement. We make this promise to be well tuned towards things like virtue and happiness, that our actions are in agreement with the self. And this leads to a flourishing of potential. When we make this promise in good faith to develop these habits of positivity, of expecting good things to happen, this allows the improving capacity of the Pneuma to come in and really start going to work on every aspect of our life and bringing our life more and more into harmony, giving us more vitality, leading to more synchronicities, giving us a more positive outlook to life, which is really what we need to bring things into this world. We have to believe that we're bringing things into a good place, and really believe it, and really have faith in it, and believe that we're creating that world together. We have that responsibility, and we're grasping it, and we're taking hold of it. So that's kind of what we're developing in this stage of Aries that Jupiter's in right now. And that wraps up the expression of progression. And we're going to be moving next into the expression of proficiency.